Good evening. Welcome to the Budget Subcommittee meeting of Tuesday, August 24th, 2021. The first item on the agenda is the discussion and vote election of board officers, chair and vice chair. So I will take a nomination first for chair, if anyone has one.
Yes, I would, myself and Caroline, I would like to nominate Jackie.
Second.
Second.
Caroline.
Thank you. All right, well, we'll do a roll call vote. Shireen,
Yes.
Caroline,
Yes.
Connor.
I'm a voting member. Reed.
Okay. Are you? Yes. Jamie.
Stebbins, yes.
Marilyn, you are not a voting member, correct? Or Wendy?
Correct.
Wiseman, yes. Mike?
Yes.
Great, thank you very much. All right, so I will take a nomination for a vice chair. Caroline?
Of course, we can't discuss these things ahead of time, so I'm wondering if either Mike or Jamie would be amenable to that role. And if you would both be amenable, we'll have to toss a coin, but
I can't think of somebody more amenable than Jamie.
you can't think of anyone more amenable? Oh, so you're like kind of guessing his mental state?
You guys know me. I'll do what I'm told to do with a smile. But I saw Jamie put his hand up, so I second Jamie.
Are you Okay, so you're nominating Jamie?
Oh, I thought you did. Yes,
Well,
I'm
I was
nominating
saying that whoever
DePietro,
was
nominating Jamie Stebbins.
Okay,
Do I have a second?
I'll second
Okay.
that.
Roll call vote. We'll start with Shireen.
Yes.
Caroline?
Yes.
Connor, are you a voting member? Connor?
Yes.
Jamie?
Yes.
Wiseman, yes. Mike?
Mike, yes.
Congratulations, Jamie.
Thank you very much.
Jamie is vice chair. Okay, so now on to the next item, the fiscal year 2022 budget position. Connor?
Sure. So I'm actually going to kick it over to Wendy just to give a brief verbal update on the year end for fiscal 21 and how that positions us for the current year we're in. Wendy?
Yes. So, we are in the process of still closing things out, but right now revenues did perform very well in fiscal 21. So local receipts came in almost 800,000 above what we had estimated. So that was really, really excellent. We did have some areas some areas are going to lag. Ambulance receipts, our runs were down, so that revenue was definitely down compared to the previous year. And also interest income, because rates have really gone down, but that will help us with the school project. So those areas were down, but overall the receipts did very well. Licenses and permits did very well. And hopefully, that will continue. It doesn't seem like that is going to slow down for this fiscal year. So I think that, considering the fact that we budgeted conservatively, that really put us in a really good position. Our revenues are over $1 million, collectively over budget, which is fantastic. And like I said, local receipts make up a good chunk of that. But I will say, our local receipts about $7.5 million. We budgeted about 6.7. They are up over fiscal 20 because that came in at about 7.3. No, I'm sorry. They are. They're still not where they were for 20. Sorry, 7.3 was actually the budget, but the actual for fiscal 20 was 7.6. But we're still very close, and we're doing very well compared to the budget.
Great.
So I don't have any reason for concern, at this point for what we estimated for fiscal 22.
Great news. Anything else on that item? Questions, comments? Okay. Then we're going to go on to discussion of the American Rescue Plan funding. Connor?
Sure. So this is an item that we haven't discussed as a subcommittee yet. Wanted to just get this on the agenda for what I anticipate will probably be a recurring item for the next couple of years for us.
Mhm.
Just a brief overview. I'm sure everyone on the subcommittee has some familiarity with this. The American Rescue Plan Act is the COVID relief bill signed into law by President Biden this March. Some of the real major headline aspects of that bill were the direct financial relief to citizens in the form of stimulus payments, and now recurring child tax credits payable directly to most families in America starting in July. But there was other aspects of the rescue plan that included substantial funding for local governments, state governments, and also more grant funding for school districts around the country. And for Easton, the American Rescue Plan included $2.6 million in direct federal aid, which is great. However, the larger portion of that, nearly double that, in amount over $4 million, that is calculated for the benefit of Easton, is currently with the county government, just because of the way that law was written. In most of the United States, counties provide a significant level of the services and cities and towns do not. That is not the case in Massachusetts. And so if you are a resident of a municipality in Bristol or Norfolk or Plymouth, roughly 2 out of every 3 federal dollars that otherwise would have flowed to your city or town were you in Suffolk County, is with the county government for now. So we are working with the county on trying to figure out a process for not only the actual legal and financial mechanisms for passing some or most of that through, but also the determination from the county on how much, if any, they will pass through. They are technically the prime recipient of those federal funds. They could administer that themselves as they see fit within the confines of the law, which are quite broad, which is different from CARES, right? CARES was the 2020 calendar year 2020 federal relief bill, was much more restrictive and narrowly tailored to things that are very, very directly relating to COVID, whereas a rescue plan is still eligible for COVID-related spending, but also to help communities recover from the negative impacts of COVID, both from a public and social health standpoint, but also economically. So the county is working on that. We are advocating, obviously, that an equitable per capita distribution of those funds be passed through to Easton and all the other municipalities in the county. They had set Labor Day as a goal for themselves to have an application process and a determination on a variety of kind of boring accounting things we all need to deal with, like indemnity for grant compliance and things like that. No offense to either of the accountants on the call. But those are obviously very necessary components. They don't look like they're going to meet that deadline because it's about 10 days away, but hopefully it's soon. So we're working on that. Those funds under ARPA are not only broader in their eligible uses, we have more time to plan and implement and spend them. Those funds are eligible to be encumbered through the end of calendar 2024, with certain capital expenses occurring after that in 25 and 26. So that's quite some time. We have not laid out a roadmap for a detailed spending plan of those funds yet, for a variety of reasons, but the chief driver of that is that roughly 2/3 of it is in limbo right now on whether or not we will receive it. But I did want to just give that broad overview of what those funds are, generally what we could use them for. In speaking with Superintendent Cabral, the early priorities that we think are consistent with the intent of that federal legislation are a couple of items: supporting access to education by way of allocating some of that ARPA money to reduce the tuition for full-day kindergarten this fall and more of it next year to eliminate it. Potentially, depending on where the state ends up with their test to stay program for schools, having ARPA as a COVID-related fund for nursing or other medical staff who may be needed to help ensure that people are staying safe in school and have access to the testing they need so that once they are at school, they could stay in school. And then on the town side, looking at some revenue replacement to add staff back to the police department, which is woefully understaffed at this point. That is a portion of the direct funding we know we will receive, but we did not want to get over our skis and start laying out tons of multi-million-dollar investment plans before we know what the county will do. So I wanted to just put that out there, see if there's any preliminary thoughts, answer any questions about ARPA as it pertains to Easton. Well, you're the chair, so I'm not going to.
I don't want to interrupt. Does the county have the ability to just say, we have decided we're going to allocate the money this way? We want to give 90% to this town, 10% to this town, or are there very specific limits on what they can do?
I mean, I think technically, as the recipient, they could decide how, provided that it is consistent with the law's kind of broad pillars of eligible spending, such as recovering from COVID, economic impacts for COVID, sewer, water, and broadband. Although they'd have a tough time with that because jurisdictionally, we are the ones who construct sewer and water. They could, in theory. They did have a stakeholder meeting at our pushing in July, where town management and selectmen from, I think, every city or every town and representatives of the mayors from the cities in Bristol County did attend, and the town gave, and I probably should find it, very, very specific feedback that was echoed by, I believe, everyone in the room, which was that we would request three things of the county, which is, to the extent they require us to apply for these funds at all, they just duplicate the state application process. So we have to apply for the federal funds through the Department of Revenue right now, but it's a relatively simple application where we provide our information, our tax information, and we sign a legal agreement that says we understand that we are bound to administer these funds in accordance with United States Treasury standards, and that if we don't, we may be committing fraud and our careers are over and all those good things. And then they debit us the money, and that's it. That provides flexibility, that provides us the ability to get this money out into the economy and doing good work now, which is what the very, very, very clear intent of the legislation in the president's agenda was. So we asked for that. Please duplicate the process so we don't have to fill out one set of paperwork for the state and a second for the county. That makes accounting and reporting and compliance for audits much easier as well. The second thing that we asked for was please stick with the per capita distribution model that has been used by the federal government. So they have allocated eligible ARPA funds based on whether or not you are a community development block grant, I believe, or a metropolitan city, a major city. So cities that have had disproportionately negative impacts, lower income communities receive more federal dollars. But other what are called non-entitlement units of government, so most towns receive, I think, a very specific, I think it's $115 per capita. So we requested to the county, please just duplicate that. Let's do a per capita model rather than try to effectively establish means testing of each city and town by the county, because that would obviously take something that could be very quantitative.
Sure.
And equitable, although not perfect. Per capita distribution is not perfect, but then it would then be removing the judgment of the merit of programs for communities from the people who are elected and hired to make those decisions and moving it to the county, which in my somewhat biased position as a town official, not appropriate. So duplicate the existing application forms, please. Stick to a per capita distribution. So even perhaps if the county is going to hold on to some of that money for eligible county spending, whatever pot of money is determined by the county to flow down to the local level, let's distribute it per capita.
Mhm.
And then the third was the county did bring up a very legitimate indemnity and liability concern, which is that as what's called the prime recipient of these federal dollars, even if they did transfer the funds, let's say they transferred every dollar straight to the cities and towns, said, hey, you wanted it, it's yours, your problem to comply. The county maintains compliance responsibility for
Okay.
the money is spent, even if they give it away. So they have a rational and vested interest in ensuring that they are protected from liability that could arise from a mismanagement of those funds. And it's a significant amount of money. The county, for perspective, their annual operating budget's of 20 million and change, and they received 110 million federal dollars. The comparable situation is if the town of Easton received $500 million. We're relatively good at managing the money we are used to managing here, but we would be hiring a army of accountants if we had to manage
Sure.
money. So even it's the counties in their defense can't just kind of quick and easy say, sure, like they did with CARES. CARES flowed through the counties with the exception of Plymouth to the cities and towns to administer because we are the ones who are employing teachers, police, firefighters who are on the front lines. The ARPA's broader, so the counties did not just immediately turn it back to the state to pass through. And they do have that piece. The compliance piece it makes perfect sense that they want to have the right paperwork in order so that if they grant any amount of money to, let's say, Easton, that they have the appropriate indemnification so that if we spend the money inappropriately and the federal government comes after the county as a recipient, that we are legally bound to indemnify them and hold them harmless. So to help with that, we wrote a draft intergovernmental agreement that did just that and gave it to them more than a month ago. And we are trying to help move them along. So they are working on it, but that was an extraordinarily long-winded answer to your question of, I think, yes, technically they could make a decision to allocate it in a variety of ways, as long as it wasn't completely out of bounds of the federal legislation. But they have indicated, they acknowledge that they heard loud and clear the request from cities and towns across Bristol County that regardless, all of us have very different communities, and everyone said just stick the same per capita formula makes the most sense.
Okay.
Is there any indication they won't do that? I mean, like, is there some champion for some cockamamie scheme or anything, or is it just we're just dealing with
So
process?
I can't speak for the county. Until they start taking votes on these things, which they haven't. We don't know. I mean, again, they've indicated like they get it. They understand the logic of the per capita distribution. I think there's to an extent, understandable desire of, okay, per capita makes sense, but we kind of would like to know what it will be spent on. But the state of Massachusetts isn't asking us what our plans are. They're just saying, do you swear that you will spend it in accordance with the federal law? And the answer is yes. And then it's up to the communities to determine that. So hopefully there is not this additional layer of kind of means testing and turning it into a competitive grant process. Because again, not that we're afraid of grants and winning grants, but it's just if we're going to have access to federal funds to help the community recover and build back from COVID, we'd like to just do it.
Right.
And even just for preliminary things that we feel comfortable saying publicly, I think are pretty incontrovertibly right on the mark for what that legislation is meant to do and help more kids get to school, help the community be safe, help keep kids in school. So.
Right.
Connor, I was just going to say, and you mentioned this was back in July, and I think you, Dottie, and possibly Craig had attended, and I know you spoke, and a lot of people appreciated you taking the lead on it. Have you been given a timeline or a check-in as to when they may vote, or will they bring you back in for further clarification on any of the points? Is there any communication that you're keeping a line of communication open with the county?
So there is a commissioner who is kind enough to answer still when I call him. And so I am checking in with the commission that way every 2 weeks pretty much. But no, they don't have a date set. They had set that goal of hopefully by Labor Day, they would have the application process handled. They have begun, I believe, working to hire accounting and legal firms to assist them. And this is just not something they have the in-house staff to manage. And they are working with Plymouth and Norfolk counties to try to basically bulk purchase these contracts for accounting and attorneys, because between the three of them, actually I have the article right here, the three counties, Plymouth, Norfolk, and Bristol, will be receiving $348 million of federal stimulus money. So they have a lot of money to manage. So they're trying to get those accountants and attorneys on board. But no, Jamie, I have not been given a specific date. I assume that the day after Labor Day, a lot of town managers will be making phone calls to ask for status updates, and I would hope that in September we get another meeting. And if we do, I'll notify the select board and this committee.
Great.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments on this item?
Yeah, Connor, when it comes to Wendy, whoever's more appropriate, when it comes to, I mean, we're going to get the 1.2 you said, or whatever it was, plus whatever the county ends up sending our way. In terms of revenue sources, how are we likely to account for it? Will it be a current year additional source? Will it be a future year source? Do we have a sense of how we'll spread it out, or is that something we're going to talk about here, or just I'm trying to figure out what its implications are, because obviously it's not recurring.
Right. No, that's those are all really good questions, and the answer is it depends on how it is being spent. So, like CARES, ARPA funds are not necessarily subject to appropriation, which means that they wouldn't, like, we spent $2.2 million in CARES, and that wasn't shown as a revenue source on the operating budget because it was a federal grant that could be spent. We have detailed reporting requirements to the State Department of Revenue, so like there are detailed records of that COVID spending. But the intention there was for those funds to be flexible. If we had to go to a town meeting every time we needed to buy PPE, we wouldn't have had masks.
Right.
However, ARPA is unique that there are components of it that can be used. One of the main categories of eligible uses for cities and towns is revenue replacement. And to the crafters, the authors of the bill's credit, they didn't make revenue replacement something that necessitated a drop in year-over-year revenue, because that, even in bad years, as we just discussed, so we exceeded our budgeted local receipts, although the actuals are still slightly below where we were pre-COVID, right? So better than we expected, but still not as good as we probably would have been had this all never happened.
Right.
So the way that it works with the American Rescue Plan is that cities and towns, and if I start going off the deep end here, interrupt me, but cities and towns are able to calculate revenue replacement not against actual loss, not adjusted for inflation, because that's not really how budgets work. It is to calculate your actual year-over-year revenue growth against a pre-COVID counterfactual where your revenue would have continued growing at the national average local rate of 4.1% a year from the last full fiscal year before the pandemic. So what that means is take fiscal 19, which is the last fiscal year before COVID was in play, add 4.1% for your revenue. That is your revenue loss number. And then what did you actually collect? And that delta you can use to replace that gap. And unlike the rest of like the programmatic grant spending, that money can be used extraordinarily broadly for any service that is customarily provided by a town or school government. So what that practically means for Easton is, as many of you know, we do not typically see 4% revenue growth every year.
You noticed that too.
That number stuck out to me. And the fine print, the guide book on this is 150 pages. If the counterfactual revenue trend, just based on where we are right now, even if the county passed through every dollar, which they have no obligation to do and haven't guaranteed, that counterfactual assumption is so much higher than where we will be in the post-COVID years that we could use over $7 million in those 3.5 years for revenue replacement alone, without spending a dollar programmatically. It doesn't mean that's the right thing or the best way to go about it, but we
Right.
could. Doing so, it remains to be seen, and it's worth talking about in this forum. To me, it makes sense, and Wendy, unless you can see a reason otherwise, programmatic spending for a grant doesn't usually show up on your operating budget. But if we were going to use some of the ARPA money under a revenue replacement category, we would probably show that as a revenue source on the actual ledger. Part of ARPA's requirements are creating public reports. So whether it's through revenue replacement that would show up in our budget book, or a programmatic grant thing, we will have to pull together a portal of some kind for the public to be able to look and say, hey, where's all this money going anyway? So that's one question as far as where does this stuff show up. The second question you had about how do we kind of intelligently think about this in a multi-year way, because it's one-time money, although it's a good deal of one-time money. It is very hard for us to come up with those strategic multi-year spend down plans outside of the limited priorities I identified as the kind of foundation today, until we know how much we're working with. Because we really would be spinning our tires pretty hard to try to come up with what's a 4 million, a 3 million plan, a 4 million plan, a 5 million plan. Hopefully, if it's the end of September and we're still hearing nothing from the county, we're probably going to just start doing that anyway. But we are hoping that we learn a little bit more about what our total spend power will be, and that will give us the tools we need to come up with multi-year plans. But generally, one-time money, you don't want to do too much staff. However, a lot of the services that help people recover from COVID are not delivered by laptops; they're delivered by people. So there's going to have to be a balance there. There's a lot. There's a lot of different ways to go about it. So we are thinking the same thing you are, and we don't have a comprehensive plan yet, just because we don't know enough about how and when we'll acquire all those funds.
Yeah, and it's a legitimate point, right? That we don't know how much, so let's not go shopping. From a planning, governance, budgeting type of perspective, my naive inclination is that the top priority ought to be maintenance of level services. In other words, if we have anything that's going to lead to a service reduction that's reasonably predictable, I would advocate for assigning that money in such a way that it defrays that. And I would suggest doing so as much as possible over that period of time. In other words, not protect it for one single year, protect everybody, so to speak, for one single year, and then have an even harder hit the next year. But just my sense is, where we have services today, I'd love to see them kept. But obviously that's a naive statement. Somebody could come along and say, programmatically, we're missing this wonderful thing. So just felt the need to express myself.
That is a very good point, and I think it's the kind of default operating posture, at least of a town side, although I think that's similar for schools, because even before COVID hit, we've been operating in the kind of structural revenue deficit mindset, where we're trying to maintain what we have and occasionally make progress, but it's quite difficult. So, where the current fiscal year we are in, we don't have any imminent service reductions. We actually, built back marginally in 22. And it's important for all of us, and I'm sure this is not news to anyone on this committee, to keep in mind in a broader context that despite adding a little bit of meat back to the bone this year, we are still far below staff levels in fiscal 20, county and school government. And the needs are higher than ever. So you are right. And that is my inclination. And that is part of why we have not put out a list to say, like, here's all the really awesome new programs we can do with this money. Because one of the really, really important priorities for us is to be able to have this as although it's one time, if it's available for many years, that can be a really important, sustainable component of financial sustainability while we build out of this.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. Anything else? Okay, then we'll go on to the next item, which is the discussion of fiscal year 2023 budget outlook and calendar. Connor?
So the outlook is decent. It's better than 18 months ago, but that could change depending on how persistent the current surge of COVID cases is, and whether or not that begins to have measurable and noticeable negative impacts on the economy. The jobs report last month, I think almost 1 million jobs were added back, and even the politicians who typically would want to shout that from a rooftop said, let's not get too excited because COVID cases are increasing and this may not continue at that rate. So nationally, I think there's a lot up in the air there. Hopefully vaccine uptake continues and full authorization on Pfizer hopefully will help with that. And keep the lid on that. In the Northeast, obviously, cases are increasing, but it is still a much, much, much better condition from a COVID perspective than in the South, and hopefully that'll keep the economies moving in a positive direction here. So outside of the kind of obvious COVID caveat that I would be negligent to say I have any idea what January might look like on that front. Economically, things look okay. You know, we fared better than we thought we would on a revenue side for the fiscal year that just closed. We have some interesting opportunities in front of us with ARPA, although there's still a lot more to learn. So feel okay about that. Admittedly, not scientific. And then as far as calendar, you know, this is obviously the first budget subcommittee meeting for the fiscal year. Wendy, do you want to just kind of lay out broadly what we're looking at for the fall, starting to get some more detailed revenue estimates and, you know, things like capital and operating budget requests?
Right. So we're going to target a date of November 1st to kind of get the memos out for operating and capital budget requests, with the requests that they get back early December, so that we can at least do a preliminary run through of all the requests through the month of December. And then we'll continue on, you know, after the holidays and get more into, you know, the review with Finance Committee and getting out a preliminary budget.
Any talk of elevating the conversation about buildings, public works, public safety, and, you know, and I know we're looking now at 23. So any conversation about that?
Yeah. So last night I noted in my goals for this year, obviously we still have construction of a new school going on, which is great. But concurrent to that, we need to start thinking much more seriously about the addressing the long-term building needs for public works and public safety in particular. Lothrop Street stations are 60 to 70 years old and not operationally sufficient. DPW has had some renovations in certain portions on the inside done in-house by our staff at DPW, but the fleet maintenance equipment and bays are woefully inadequate and not compliant with innumerable building and environmental codes. None of this is new. These are things that we've been tracking over time. The 2014 Doran-Whittier report identified tens of millions in replacement and repair needs for town and school buildings. The priority was focused, obviously, from a replacement standpoint on the 3 elementary schools. But in 2019, right before COVID hit, Director of Public Works Dave Field issued a report to the Municipal Building Committee on the status of municipal buildings and their repair and replacement needs, looking at, you know, between 30 and 50 million just for police, fire, and DPW. So that's something that we, I think, is important that we start rolling into our consideration of long-term financial strategy. Because obviously anything of that size will have significant financial implications for our capital and operating planning. unlike a school building, we don't have access to MSBA or something of that nature for assistance with state funding, although that a bill to create a similar state authority for municipal buildings is kind of perennially floating out there just out of reach, would be a wonderful thing. So that adds a layer of challenge. And on the flip side, without that process, we don't have kind of a prescriptive, and I'm trying to remain value neutral here. The MSBA process is extraordinarily prescriptive on you must and shall do these 7,000 things to get from planning to building, which can be overwhelming, but it also makes it very, very clear the order of events, what you have to do. That's not the case with a municipal building project. There's more flexibility for the approach. So that's something the chiefs and DPW director have been looking at for some time, and hopefully after Labor Day at some point in the fall, we can start having more discussions about different options of project approach, timelines, magnitude of cost, also familiarizing folks with the need, right? I mean, that's a huge part of any kind of project like this. Not everyone has been inside public works or police or fire. It's not, like a school where everyone kind of not everyone, most residents have some connection to it because most people would have a child connect physically with that structure at some point over time. I would say most people don't go in a police or fire station all that often, which is probably good. And so hopefully in the fall, starting to bring more attention to those items, because that's going to have to be an important aspect of capital planning moving forward.
The last thing I'll ask about that is Mansfield. Town officials there, do we have a good enough relationship with them? We could inquire. Maybe you already know a lot of the information of how that project went and how they were able to ultimately fund their municipal services building.
Yes, so we do have good relationships with them, in particular through SEMRAC, through regional dispatch. That public safety building was actually the original home for SEMRAC before we found High Rock on the side of a mountain and picked that instead. So we certainly can. We do have good institutional knowledge in-house as well. Dave Field's been involved with a lot of building projects in his career. And the new fire chief actually was the assistant owner's project manager for a municipal building project in his prior work as well. So between that and our own experience with building the communication center for SEMRAC, we do have plenty of good resources to draw on. It's just like anything else. It's just time, energy, and resources that we need to start marshaling in that direction. We've all, particularly public safety, been focused on COVID. So will remain so, but we need to start that conversation. I think a good frame of reference is for where we are today with the Blanche James Elementary School. I think it was January 2017 was the statement of interest letter. Is that right? Something like that. So it's your years and years out, and even before the statement of interest, there was a ton of preliminary work by the schools to kind of get to that point of justifying the ask, right? So
years of applications that were denied. Yes.
So
that's a really
long time coming.
Thank you.
Anything else? Okay, then we'll move on to discussion about the special town meeting, November 8th, 2021. Connor?
That's how you really know summer is over. The board, select board, voted last night to open a warrant for article submittals for a special town meeting on November 8th. It is our goal to go back to school ourselves finally and have this at all of our aims. Not that Stonehill have not been very gracious guests, but we feel that between vaccine uptake and masking, we can do this safely. So November 8th, Monday, we'll have a special town meeting. Any committee that has need of articles, the memo will go out probably tomorrow asking that those be submitted to my office by September 15th. And that's really it for now, unless anyone has questions about town meeting. Hopefully a typical special, just supplementing capital, finalizing the operating budget so we can set the tax rate, any other, appropriations or transfers that can't wait till the spring and things like that.
Questions or comments? Okay. Next item, status reports from representative boards and committees.
How's the school committee doing? Are you guys busy?
Oh, yeah, we're having a lot of fun. Yeah, school committee we're working on opening of the schools. We're working on our policies. We're in touch with Desi, who's giving us wonderful guidance all the time. And we're just moving forward. We're first day of school September 1st, so we're looking forward to that. Working on our agreements. And Caroline, you have anything to add? Universal masking in the schools?
Jackie, I wish you wouldn't lie to the group. When you say we're receiving wonderful guidance from Desi, we're receiving last minute, sort of flying by the seat of their pants guidance that conclusions we came to months earlier. But other than that, I do agree with what you said. Lots going on. It's been really fun being the focus of a certain element in the town.
We're really popular these days.
Super popular among that particular element, yes.
Yeah, so we're just working on the details about masking, spacing, lunches, all of that fun stuff. So
athletics, extracurriculars, everything.
Yep.
I can just add a couple things. Is that okay, Jackie?
Of course.
Just backtracking a little, for the summer, we expanded our summer school program this year. So usually we have like 125 to 150 special ed students in summer school. This year we had over 200 special ed students, but we also had 275 regular ed students that came to it was called the SEA, the Summer Enrichment Academy, and it was very well received. And the way we funded that is we are also working with federal funds through the state. The ESSER funds, ESSER 1, ESSER 2, and ESSER 3. We don't have ESSER 3 secured yet because there actually is a large application process that goes along with that. They need data, opening plans, ed plans, so we have to do all that. But we did fund our summer school program with ESSER 1, ESSER 2, and a $50,000 summer school grant that we got also. So we did that. We are also in the middle of doing a lot of hiring right now. We had a lot of turnover this year. I don't know why, but there was a lot of people decided to leave or retire or whatever. We have like 30 new teachers, and then plus paras, interventionists. We're hiring a lot of interventionists with the federal funds to address the learning loss. And what else? Yes, and now we have all this. We did not anticipate doing cleaning, testing, nursing, contact tracing. This is all something that just in the last few weeks we're realizing now that we thought that was over, but now we have to figure out how to do all that. I think that's it. And the construction. Just a little thing.
A few things.
That's about it.
Thank you. How's the select board doing?
On the town side, I will say I thought we were busy until I listened to that. But no, and Connor, I'm just going to say a lot of the PFAS work, obviously, Connor being appointed to the state task force on that is a really big deal. He's the only municipal official that's been asked to be a subject matter expert on the state task force. So that's a big deal. He's not going to toot his own horn, so I will. But to get the regular updates on that has been really empowering, and soon, we'll be able to spread more information to the town. So that's just one of, Connor, maybe you can share a few other things going on.
Yeah, sure. So every week is infrastructure week, which is good. Depot Street's under construction. Downtown is under construction. Iron and manganese water plants will be moving to bid, as will PFAS plants. So we will be constructing 4 water treatment plants in the next 2 years. So those are all important and worthy investments. So those things are great. And it's sort of akin to the conversation around school policy. I think there was a fleeting period in summer where monitoring COVID was pulling up weekly reports and saying, "Oh, 0, this is incredible," and now kind of making sure that we're continuing our work on that front. We've had a few one-off vaccine clinics we've been able to offer, which is great. Obviously now vaccines are widely available pretty much anywhere, pharmacies, grocery stores, most medical facilities, but still trying to find ways to bring vaccines to a location that is welcoming and familiar and convenient for folks. I believe we worked with the schools for a back-to-school clinic and just kind of tracking the uptake there, which is great. In the past month, actually, I think we jumped from in the 50% range to close to 2/3 of kids 12 to 15 in Easton are now fully vaccinated, which is awesome progress. And more than 80% of 30 and up in Easton, or I think maybe 40 and up, are fully vaccinated. So keeping up the work on that as well. So I'm sure there's a lot more that we're working on, but those things stick to the top of my mind. And the work on PFAS.
You could speak to it too, but economic development, just a lot of great things that obviously folks are involved in on Main Street, but then many others. So the new app that was recently launched, maybe you could just talk a little.
I love that new app. That was such a great idea.
So that the Discover Easton app, through a partnership with OCPC through federal economic recovery grants. Thank you, Jamie and Jackie. There are a lot of programs there regionally working with OCPC, the Economic Development Committee, doing things like pulling MassDOT in and having planning meetings with business owners in commercial districts such as along Route 138 to come up with tailored reports on economic recovery strategies for local businesses impacted by COVID in those areas. Starting to, again, work with restaurants on starting to think about winter outdoor spaces, because that may need to still be a thing. Hopefully not, but just getting ready there. So the app is great. Kind of trying to pull together resources for folks, pulling information from various social media feeds, business directories, the town's website. A lot of good activity. Wendy mentioned licenses and permits that were kind of through the roof, which is awesome. Our inspectors, both in Board of Health and Building, have never been busier between real estate transactions, building permits for homeowners, new commercial construction going on, new Starbucks being built in Five Corners, new restaurants opening down there, a lot of good activity happening down there, which is really exciting to see. That despite COVID and all the destabilization there, that area is starting to really pop, which is awesome. So a lot going on that aspect as well. Easton Outside has been a super successful campaign with local businesses and nonprofits and the Economic Development Council, which has been really great to see. And there was one other aspect.
Wayfinding, working.
Oh, wayfinding, that's right, yes. So downtown, we are working on the streetscape, sidewalk expansion for more outdoor dining and accessibility, improving crosswalks and pedestrian safety down there. And as part of that grant, creating new wayfinding signage that will be used as a basis moving forward for Public Works for whenever they create new signage, so that there's a kind of uniform sign template for finding municipal parking, trails, parks, schools, Public Works, public safety, so that it sticks out and has a brand effectively. And last night asked the select board to create a working group that has representation from a broad array of committees, including the ones you would more typically think of, oh, it's downtown, the historical commission, but also including representation from the Commission on Disabilities and Human Rights Committee, so that we're being cognizant of different ways people engage with signage and things like that. So so that's moving too. So good things. We're busy, but it's
That's a lot.
busy. So
FinCom, anything exciting there?
I was hoping Shrine was about to unmute and say something because I wasn't at the last meeting.
I was just gonna say, I was gonna defer to you.
I apologize because
We do have a tentative meeting coming up on September 13th. I believe it's a joint meeting, and we're hoping to review resumes or applications for some of the missing positions that we have. We did not meet in the month of July, nor did we meet in the month of August. So we will be getting our schedules together and rolling forward next month.
Great, thank you. Anything else?
That's it for us.
Okay, then we'll move on to approval of meeting minutes. February 18th, 2020 is the first set. Does anyone have any comments or questions or edits about these? Okay, then I'll take a motion to approve.
Evans, so moved.
A second,
O'Neill second.
a roll call vote.
Yes, yes.
Caroline,
O'Neill, yes.
Connor,
yes.
Jamie,
Evans, yes.
Wiseman, yes.
yes,
Great. The next set of minutes are from Tuesday, March 9th, 2021. Do I have any comments, questions, edits? Great, then I'll take a motion to approve.
Evans, so moved.
Second,
I think so,
Yes,
second.
second.
okay. Roll call vote.
Yes, yes.
O'Neill, yes.
Connor,
Reed, yes.
Evans, yes.
Wiseman, yes.
Peter, yes.
Great. Thank you. Setting of next budget subcommittee meeting. Connor?
So I just wanted to have a discussion with the subcommittee on what times work. We used to meet in the day. That doesn't work well for lots of volunteers.
Sure.
What is this the time that works? Is there a desire to move back to the day? I certainly do, but I know that I am very biased there. But what works for everyone here, and what would you like to see moving forward? Do we want to schedule regular meetings now? Do we want to wait till fall when we have revenue estimates, call a meeting, and at that point schedule for the budget season?
I'd recommend not scheduling anything till we have some numbers to talk about, with the exception being if you get good clarity from our buddies at the county level. I don't know what people think, but there might be a benefit to us discussing it before the original memo goes out. But I defer.
Any other comments about this? Opinions?
So I'm just going to say I would 6 p.m. on Tuesday nights, I think, is what I would shoot, but I can make other things work too. So if there's other time slots, please throw them out there.
Agreed.
6 p.m. work for everyone else on Tuesdays?
I may have a conflict with class, but I won't know until a couple of weeks out.
Okay, so
I
just
would, yeah.
let us know. And does everyone want to wait and not schedule the next meeting yet until we hear either that we have some news from the county or we have some numbers to talk about?
And I think that circles back on Connor, your thought too, right? And Mike, so we could.
Yeah, so as soon as we either have our own local budgeting moving off the ground of revenue or something meaningful on ARPA from the county, then we could have Michael send a poll and get some availability and get together. And at that point, set a look forward calendar. That's fine.
Great.
Okay, great.
I think of 1 or 2 meetings before the special town meeting.
I guess it depends. If we don't hear anything meaningful on ARPA, and I mean one or two, I would say probably is a reasonable expectation, because town meeting is early in November, so that leaves September and October for one meeting each, and each of our respective committees will be quite busy for town meetings. So I would think one or two would be sufficient, but happy to be persuaded otherwise.
Okay, well, I don't see any public participation. If anyone is out there who wants to raise a hand or put something in the Q&A, but I don't see anything. So I will take a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn, DePietro.
Second?
Second,
Yes.
Diaz.
Roll call.
Diaz, yes.
O'Neill, yes.
Reed, yes.
Evans, yes.
Wiseman, yes.
DePietro, yes.
It was very nice seeing all of you. Hope you all have a good night, and we'll talk soon.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Good
guys.
night.
Good to see
Bye.
you.
Thank you.
At everybody, yes.